The newlyweds from Kingston, Jamaica had just tied the knot in a lavish ceremony only days earlier. Friends and family called it a fairy tale wedding. There was laughter, champagne, and a slow dance that seemed to seal a perfect beginning. Marcia, a strikingly beautiful 28-year-old marketing executive, wore a white designer gown that shimmered like the Caribbean Sea under sun. Dwayne, 32, beamed with pride in a tailored suit, his arm around the woman he believed was the love of his life. But beneath the surface of the fairy tale, something far darker stirred. Their honeymoon destination was handpicked by Marcia, a luxurious beach resort in Nungwi, on the northern tip of Zanzibar, known for its tranquility and exclusivity. A place where the waves whispered secrets and the palms swayed with every breeze. The perfect romantic escape. Or, for Marcia, the perfect crime scene. The couple arrived in Zanzibar just before sunset, stepping off the small chartered plane that had flown them from Dar es Salaam. Resort staff greeted them with cold towels, coconut drinks, and flower necklaces. Marcia's eyes sparkled as she took in the ocean views, but not with the joy of a bride beginning her new life. There was calculation behind those eyes, a quiet, brewing intention she kept hidden behind practiced smiles. Dwayne was genuinely excited. He had never traveled this far before. He marveled at the beauty of the island, eagerly snapping photos of their beachfront suite, their candlelit dinners, and Marcia's feet in the warm sand. He posted updates to Instagram with hashtags like #ForeverLove and #ZanzibarDream. His wife joined in the act, uploading selfies with captions like, "My king forever," and "Can't believe I'm his." It was convincing, too convincing. To their friends and family back home, it looked like the perfect couple living out the perfect start to forever. But behind closed doors, Dwayne had begun to notice a chill in Marcia's behavior. She was more attached to her phone than to him. She'd often stay out on the balcony late at night, whispering into her device, claiming she was video chatting with family or checking in with her office. When Dwayne asked what was wrong, she'd smile and say, "Nothing, babe, just tired." She seemed distracted, distant, less interested in romantic walks and more interested in controlling the itinerary, where they went, what time they left the resort, and who they spoke to. Dwayne chalked it up to post-wedding exhaustion, unaware that something far more sinister was unfolding. The first few days passed quietly. They lounged by the water, explored local markets, and even went snorkeling along the coral reefs. But something in Marcia's demeanor felt off. Her affection came in waves, but it always felt rehearsed, like she was ticking off moments she needed captured. A kiss here, a laugh there, another photo of them smiling in the sunset. Dwayne couldn't have known that each of these moments was being carefully orchestrated. Not for memories, but for alibis. What Dwayne saw as a beginning, Marcia saw as the perfect end. And in just a few days, on a remote cliffside overlooking the Indian Ocean, she planned to make that end a reality. In the age of Instagram perfection, Marcia and Dwayne Bennett appeared to be the kind of couple people envied. On the outside, they had it all: good looks, stylish clothes, frequent vacations, and a love story that seemed cut from the pages of a romance novel. But as is often the case with stories too good to be true, the truth was far more complicated. They met at a business expo in Montego Bay in 2019. Dwayne had recently launched a modest construction supply business. Marcia, representing a local marketing agency, was managing a booth for a client. Their chemistry was instant, at least that's how Dwayne would later describe it. She was poised, confident, and magnetic in the way she commanded attention in a room full of entrepreneurs. They exchanged numbers. Lunches turned into dinners, and within months, they were living together in a condo in New Kingston. But from the very beginning, there were red flags, subtle at first, then harder to ignore. Dwayne's friends noticed how quickly he became isolated. Marcia didn't like when he stayed out late, especially with single friends. She monitored his social media activity, once demanding he unfollow an ex-girlfriend even though they hadn't spoken in years. At first, Dwayne chalked it up to love. Marcia was protective, maybe a little intense, but it felt flattering in a strange way. He convinced himself that it was normal, passionate even, but there was more. Marcia kept secrets. She never talked about her family. She claimed she was raised by an aunt but offered few details. Her phone was always face down. If Dwayne ever picked it up, even just to check the time, she'd snatch it back with a forced laugh. "You don't trust me?" she'd ask with narrowed eyes. The question always ended the conversation. Behind that perfectly polished exterior, Marcia had financial troubles Dwayne didn't know about. Her credit cards were maxed out. Her business dealings were rocky. She had a habit of borrowing money from friends and forgetting to pay them back. And then there was her fascination with wealth, not just making money, but acquiring it fast. She often joked, "If I ever find a shortcut to getting rich, you'll be the first to know." Dwayne thought she was joking. He always laughed. By the second year of their relationship, things had stabilized on the surface. They started traveling, trips to Barbados, Miami, even a quick vacation to Panama. Marcia handled the planning, always booking luxury stays and expensive excursions. Dwayne, proud and in love, happily footed most of the bills. Their Instagram was full of curated memories. Clinking wine glasses, beach walks, coordinated outfits, and captions like, "Better together," and "Built on trust." But behind closed doors, their arguments grew louder. Marcia grew more distant. At times, Dwayne wondered if she even liked him anymore. But whenever he brought up doubts, she'd flip the script, accusing him of being paranoid or insecure. Gaslighting became part of their routine, woven into the relationship like thread in a tapestry. Still, Dwayne stayed. He wanted to believe in their love. And despite everything, when Marcia suggested they get married during a romantic dinner in Ocho Rios, he said yes. It wasn't a traditional proposal, it wasn't even his idea, but he saw it as a sign. Maybe this would be the turning point. Maybe things would get better. They set a date. Marcia insisted on handling the insurance, the travel bookings, and even the hotel arrangements. "I want it to be special," she said. "Let me take care of everything." What Dwayne didn't know was that months before the wedding, Marcia had contacted an old online acquaintance, a man who once tried to lure her into a romance scam years ago. This time, she had a different proposition. She needed someone reliable, someone who knew how to make people disappear, someone with no emotional ties to her or Jamaica. She promised payment in US dollars. Her plan was cold, clinical, calculated. She would marry Dwayne, take him to a secluded island, and arrange for him to have a fatal accident. The insurance policy, $300,000, would be hers. A fresh start, a clean escape. Everything would look like fate, like tragedy. But it wasn't fate. It was murder, premeditated and planned down to the last detail. And it had already begun, even as Dwayne held her hand on the beach, whispering how lucky he felt. The picture-perfect couple was a facade, and the paradise they arrived in was about to become a death trap. From a distance, the beaches of Zanzibar looked like a lover's dream. Sun-soaked shores where time slowed and worries melted away with the tide. For Dwayne, every morning felt like a blessing. He woke up to the view of the Indian Ocean, the smell of salt water and spices drifting through their villa's open balcony. Beside him lay the woman he had promised to spend forever with. But even in paradise, the truth has a way of rising to the surface. By the third day of their honeymoon, something had shifted in Marcia. Her smiles grew colder. Her affection became robotic. Dwayne noticed, but tried to ignore it, telling himself she was just tired or overwhelmed by travel. He offered to book a couple's massage. She declined. He suggested they join a local group tour. She refused. Marcia insisted on doing things her way, and her way involved staying off the beaten path. She wanted them alone. What Dwayne couldn't have known was that Marcia wasn't just dodging relaxation. She was finalizing a murder, and the man she planned it with had just arrived on the island. He was listed under a false name, Musa Odiambo, and had flown in from Nairobi 2 days before. On paper, he was a tourist. In reality, he was a petty criminal with a history of smuggling and armed robbery across East Africa. He had no connection to Marcia outside of encrypted chats and a series of cold, digital transactions. She met him online nearly 8 months earlier, on a dating app she never told Dwayne about. Their conversations shifted quickly from flirtation to business. Marcia had made her offer clear. Eliminate her husband. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Payment would come in 2 parts. $7,500 up front, the remaining $7,500 after the deed was done and the insurance payout secured. Musa agreed. This wasn't his first job. While Dwayne sipped cocktails by the beach, Marcia slipped away under the pretense of booking a snorkeling trip. Instead, she met Musa at a small open-air cafe near the back streets of Stone Town. He wore sunglasses and kept his voice low. Their conversation lasted barely 10 minutes. No hugs, no eye contact, just a whisper. 2 nights from now. Be ready. Marcia returned to the resort wearing a new smile, like nothing had happened. She brought Dwayne a souvenir bracelet, cheap, but meaningful. She wrapped her arms around him and said, "Let's do something wild tomorrow night. Just the 2 of us. Somewhere private." He agreed without hesitation. He still believed she was his wife in every sense of the word. Still believed in the dream. But others had started noticing the cracks. The resort's front desk clerk, a young Zanzibari named Yusuf, later told investigators he found Marcia strange. She frequently asked about the resort's private ATV rentals and local trails, particularly ones that weren't often used by tourists. She asked about places with no cameras, remote areas, cliffside paths. When told those spots weren't ideal after dark, she laughed it off, saying, "We like adventure." Meanwhile, Dwayne was oblivious to the plan being spun around him like a spider's web. He messaged his sister back home, "Zanzibar is unreal. I think I picked the right woman." But deep down, doubts were creeping in. That evening, as they watched the sunset from a cabana, he turned to Marcia and asked, "Are you happy?" She smiled, slowly. "Of course," she said. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Later that night, Dwayne awoke to find Marcia gone from the bed. The sliding door to the balcony was open. He stepped out and found her sitting in a chair, phone pressed to her ear, whispering in hushed tones. She ended the call quickly when she saw him. "Just Mama," she said. "She's checking in." But there was no call to Mama in her call log. The call had been made through a separate app, one Dwayne didn't even know she had installed. She slid her phone into her silk robe pocket and leaned in to kiss him. "Let's make tomorrow unforgettable," she whispered. It would be unforgettable, all right, just not in the way he hoped. 2 lovers, 1 beach, a secret plan buried in the sand. The perfect place to disappear. Somewhere between the soft winds of the Indian Ocean and the rustling palms of Zanzibar. A deal had been struck. One soaked in greed, betrayal, and cold-blooded intent. By the time Dwayne Bennett was waking up beside his new bride on the 4th morning of their honeymoon, the man assigned to kill him was already scouting the terrain nearby. It was no longer just a thought or a passing temptation in Marcia's mind. It was a business transaction. It had started months before the wedding, quietly and without suspicion. Marcia had contacted a Kingston-based insurance agent, posing as a responsible future spouse. She told the agent that her soon-to-be husband was traveling internationally, and she wanted to ensure he had the best life insurance coverage, just in case something ever happened to him overseas. The agent was impressed by her concern and helped her open a new $300,000 international life insurance policy on Dwayne's name, with her listed as the sole beneficiary. The policy required a basic medical exam, which Marcia orchestrated during a clinic visit with Dwayne by casually suggesting a travel health checkup together. He never knew what paperwork she slipped into the stack, nor did he ask. She took care of everything. Always. Dwayne didn't read the fine print. He trusted his fiancée, and that trust would nearly cost him his life. On her encrypted app, Marcia finalized the last details with Musa, the Nairobi-based hitman. He wasn't a professional in the cinematic sense, but he had a record. Armed robbery, extortion, one unresolved disappearance in Mombasa. He was desperate for money and had no qualms about getting his hands dirty. Their communication was riddled with code words. The beach umbrella falls at sunset meant the hit would happen in the evening. The camera is off meant the location was unmonitored. We leave the photo album behind meant Dwayne wouldn't survive. Marcia insisted on a natural-looking accident, something that could pass off as a mugging gone wrong. She even offered a backup idea. Perhaps Dwayne could fall from the cliffs near the coast while taking photos. No weapon, no obvious foul play, just a tragic end to a beautiful trip. But Musa had another idea. Quicker, messier, and harder to trace. He'd intercept them on their ATV ride in the forested part of the trail she was arranging. He'd threaten them with a blade, pretending to rob them. Then he'd strike Dwayne fatally, injure Marcia slightly to make it look authentic, and flee into the forest under cover of night. To Marcia, it sounded perfect. She transferred another $2,000 via cryptocurrency that night. Final confirmation, she wrote. Tomorrow, sunset. The rest would be delivered once the death certificate was processed and the insurance money wired. It wasn't just a plan. It was a contract between a new bride and a hired killer. Between love and murder. Back at the resort, Dwayne was completely unaware of the noose tightening around his neck. He spent that day planning a surprise dinner for Marcia. He'd booked a table overlooking the water and arranged for a local guitarist to play her favorite reggae ballad. He even bought her a delicate silver anklet from a vendor at the beach market. Something to remember their trip. When he presented it to her, she smiled and said, "You're too good to me." But Dwayne didn't notice the sadness in her eyes. Not the emotional kind, but the emptiness of someone carrying a burden they wouldn't admit to. A countdown was ticking inside her, and with every passing hour, it grew louder in her mind. She had one more message to send. "We're on track. Location confirmed. I'll guide him." Musa's response came minutes later. "Consider it done. See you on the other side." As the sun began its descent, casting a blood-orange glow over the horizon, Marcia put on her favorite sundress. She let Dwayne wrap his arms around her as they posed for a selfie. They looked like any other couple in love. But behind her fixed smile, she was mentally rehearsing every second of the plan. The trail they'd take, where she'd slow down, where she'd text the code, ready for sunset. It was all coming together. By morning, she thought, she'd be a rich widow with a tragic story. A woman who lost the love of her life on their honeymoon. People would cry for her, comfort her. She'd collect the money, disappear from Jamaica, and start anew. But the thing about perfect plans, especially those soaked in deception, is that they never truly account for the chaos of real life. Tomorrow would not go as expected. Not for Marcia, not for Musa, and certainly not for Dwayne. The fifth day of their honeymoon started like any other postcard-perfect morning in Zanzibar. Clear skies, calm waters, and the lazy lull of waves kissing the shore. Dwayne Bennett woke up feeling unusually optimistic. Despite the strange distance he'd been sensing from Marcia, he had convinced himself it was just wedding fatigue. He didn't want to believe anything was wrong. This was their dream vacation, after all. A once-in-a-lifetime trip to paradise. But for Marcia, the countdown had entered its final hours. By noon, she had confirmed everything. The rented ATV was ready. The trailhead near Njizi Forest, where cell signal was weak and tourist footfall was rare, was mapped out. She had the drop pin location ready to share. Her burner phone buzzed just once. A single message. Position set. Waiting for signal. Musa was already in place. Dwayne, dressed in shorts and a simple polo, was grinning ear to ear when Marcia met him at the resort entrance. He held up a helmet like a kid heading to an amusement park. "I've never driven one of these before," he laughed. Marcia forced a smile. "It's easier than it looks," she said, strapping in behind him. "We'll take the coastal path. It's scenic." They drove off just before 4 p.m., weaving along dusty jungle trails lined with baobab trees and wild palms. The warm wind tangled Marcia's hair as they zipped through the tropical brush. To an outsider, they looked like two lovers sharing a private adventure. But in Marcia's mind, every turn of the trail was a countdown. Every bump in the dirt road took them 1 second closer to the kill zone. They reached a shaded patch near the edge of the forest, where the trail narrowed and ran parallel to a steep drop. Below, jagged rocks met crashing waves. No people, no cameras, just silence. Marcia leaned forward and whispered, "Let's stop for a picture. Look at that view." Dwayne nodded and killed the engine. He stepped off the ATV and walked toward the cliff's edge, pulling out his phone. Marcia stepped back quietly and sent one word through her burner app. Now. Musa emerged moments later from behind the trees, wearing a dark hoodie and sunglasses, machete in hand. He shouted in Swahili, startling Dwayne, who turned around confused. Hey! What? Musa lunged. Dwayne stumbled backward as the blade swiped through the air, missing him by inches. He didn't understand what was happening. First, he thought it was a robbery. Take my wallet. I'll give you whatever. But the man wasn't interested in money. He went for Dwayne again, and in that moment something primal kicked in. Dwayne grabbed a fallen tree branch and swung it instinctively, catching Musa across the shoulder. The attacker grunted and stumbled back. Marcia! Run! Dwayne yelled, breathless. But when he turned, she didn't move. She just stood there, frozen, watching. Her eyes locked not on the attacker but on Dwayne. That's when he saw it. The lack of panic. The absence of fear. The calm. And the truth hit him like a second machete. She knew. She planned this. Musa recovered and lunged again, slashing wildly. The blade sliced across Dwayne's forearm as he blocked it, blood spraying across his shirt. But Dwayne didn't stop. He tackled Musa full force, and the two men crashed to the ground, grappling in the dirt. The machete slipped from Musa's hand and skidded across the rocks. Marcia took a step forward as if to retrieve it, but then hesitated. If she touched it now, it tied her to the scene. Dwayne gained the upper hand. With blood dripping from his arm, he pinned Musa beneath him and screamed for help. But in this isolated corner of the island, no one could hear him. Musa managed to wriggle free and took off running into the forest, disappearing into the thick underbrush. Dwayne stumbled back, gasping, and turned to Marcia. What the hell was that? He shouted. Who was that? Marcia's expression was unreadable. She slowly approached, and for the first time, Dwayne saw it, her mask slipping. We have to call someone, he said, trying to steady his shaking hands. The police, the resort, anyone. She didn't reach for her phone. Instead, she said softly, let's just go back. Maybe it was a random attack. We shouldn't panic. But Dwayne had already made up his mind. He wasn't going back with her. Not after what he saw in her eyes. Dwayne returned to the resort alone. He collapsed at the front desk, bleeding and disoriented, barely able to speak. Security rushed to his aid. Within an hour, local police were called in. Marcia arrived shortly after, her dress immaculate, her tone calm. She claimed she had been separated from Dwayne during the ride, that she was frantic when he didn't come back. But the story was already unraveling. There were no signs of injury on her. Her phone showed encrypted messages she couldn't explain. And worse, Dwayne, now patched up and lucid, had told them everything. The police station in Zanzibar's capital, Stone Town, was a modest white-walled building nestled between tourist shops and crumbling colonial structures. It wasn't the kind of place where honeymoon dreams ended, but that's exactly where Marcia Bennett found herself just hours after her husband stumbled in, bleeding and terrified. Inside the small interrogation room, the air was heavy, the ceiling fan creaked, and the tension was suffocating. Marcia sat calmly across from Inspector Hamasai Juma, a seasoned officer with 20 years of experience. He had seen drug traffickers, poachers, smugglers, but this was his first honeymoon hit job. Still, his instincts told him something was wrong the moment he met her. She was too composed, too smooth, too cold. Dwayne, now bandaged and accompanied by embassy officials, had already given his statement. He had laid out the full story. The ATV ride, the machete-wielding attacker, the chilling moment he realized Marcia didn't scream or run. She watched, he said, his voice hollow. She didn't even flinch. He had also shared how he'd glimpsed suspicious messages on her phone before. The sudden secretive behavior, the insurance policy she never told him about, the random man who just happened to know exactly where they were. The local authorities were already cooperating with Interpol and Jamaican police to pull Marcia's digital records. But it didn't take long for the cracks to widen. The first break came when they found the burner phone hidden in Marcia's toiletry bag. It was a cheap Android, used only for encrypted messaging apps. Though many of the texts had been deleted, forensic tools were able to recover fragments. We leave the photo album behind. Use the knife. Fast. No guns. Trail C. Near the cliff. It was enough to draw the first connection. When asked directly if she recognized the number linked to the messages, Marcia blinked and said, "I don't know what that is." It was the beginning of her unraveling. Then came the second blow. Interpol agents in Nairobi, working with local authorities, identified and detained a man matching Dwayne's description of the attacker, Musa Odhiambo. He had bruises consistent with the fight, and in his possession, a printed map of the ATV trail, the same one Marcia had picked up from the resort concierge days earlier. He claimed he was just robbing tourists, but when pressed further, he crumbled. "She paid me," he finally said. "She wanted him dead. Said she'd wire me the rest after he was gone." With both the physical evidence and the testimony from Musa, there was no more room to lie. Back at the station, Inspector Hamasai returned to Marcia, laying a single photo on the table. A screen capture of one of her messages to Musa. Marcia stared at it, then at the inspector. Her breath hitched for the first time. She knew it was over. "Do you want to speak now?" he asked calmly. She didn't. Not right away. But when she did, it was barely a whisper. "He was going to ruin me." That was all she said. She refused to elaborate further. Not about the motive. Not about the money. Not about why she married a man she planned to kill days later. But the truth was being built with every passing minute, by the trail of digital footprints she thought she had erased, by the contract killer who turned on her, and by the man she had underestimated most, her husband. By midnight, Marcia Bennett was officially charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraudulent insurance activity, use of illegal communication tools to facilitate a crime. She was handcuffed and escorted out of the station into the flashing cameras of local media, her once luxurious honeymoon dress now stained with the sweat of failure. Tourists watched from behind fences. Resort staff whispered among themselves. The story spread quickly. The bride who planned a murder before dessert. The honeymoon hit woman. The wedding that ended in betrayal. As for Dwayne, he was shaken but alive. He was taken into embassy protection, and arrangements were made for him to return to Jamaica. He didn't speak to Marcia again. But in private, he told a consulate staff member, "I thought I knew her. I thought I married my best friend. But I guess I married a stranger with a plan."